But thank you guys again for the third time for joining the advocacy classroom. My name is Dr. Victoria Robinson Wilson, and we're going to be speaking about something that is very passionate to all of us, and that is advocacy. I want to begin by just asking you to think about what advocacy is. So if you have to think about your son or daughter, your grandchild, grandson, granddaughter, and you think about my son or daughter is what? My son or daughter is the only minority in their class. My son or daughter suffers with dyslexia. My son or daughter is handicapped. My son or daughter is autistic. My son or daughter is blind, but they attend regular classes because they can hear and they do everything else. They've been taught to do everything. But what can you do to make sure that you're advocating for your child or for that child that you want to be a voice for? That's what advocacy is all about. Advocacy is about being that voice for those who do not have a voice. Advocacy is to change what is into what should be. So if you think about it, imagine if you were a paraplegic and you attended a school that was not ADA accessible. There were stairs to go up to the school. There were stairs coming from the bus ramp. The classrooms had narrow door frames. How would your child or how would you access that school? How would they access the classroom? So we look at what is, and we think about advocacy is we're that voice for what things should be. And the only reason they are not that is because no one has been that voice for that child that needs someone to be the voice for them. I saw this and I thought it was very pertinent. In my world, I will fight for my child, and every child fighting a battle. I will make their voices heard from the mountaintops. I will educate and bring awareness for these true warriors. That's who we are. Those are our voices as advocates. Children and even some parents, even our teachers, they need someone in this world to be their voice for them. And many of them, their voices have been silent by no action or deed of their own. So if they don't have anyone to speak for them, who does? And that's where Seminole County Council PTA comes in at. We have to be that voice for these students. We have to be that voice for these parents. We have to be that voice that even if we're not heard, we keep trying over and over and over again. We don't stop. National PTA continues the legacy of advocacy by fighting for change. So as you look at those 5 areas that PTA advocates for, during the time that we're in right now with COVID-19, I think the largest or the most relevant area right now is family engagement. And many of us can attest to, if not all of us, that our families are being stretched to the seams because we're having to make adjustments. We're doing, even if you guys want to turn your videos off, even if you want to turn your mics on, if you don't have any background noise, I'm okay with that. But I like to know how many of us are dealing with the Seminole Connect, or you have kids in Seminole Connect and face-to-face, or you have kids doing Connect in virtual or virtual and face-to-face. We all are. And it is really something where we feel like we're screaming inside of a vacuum and no one is hearing us. Or parents who are having issues with when is a good time to pick up lunch for my child. We were in a meeting earlier this week, me and a group of parents, and we're tossing around having one person pick up the lunches for maybe people who live near you, and they're going to have to relax some of the qualifications so that you can do that. Because think about it, if you're a single parent and you have 2 kids at home, how are you going to leave to go get the lunch? So family engagement right now for me is the main area under advocacy that we're going to concentrate on today with the time that we have. And if you guys have any questions, please unmute yourself and let's just talk about it. I like that interactive feedback type of training because I feel like we learn best when we can ask questions and when we can communicate. So we're going to move on to the next slide. Family engagement is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and we call that ESSA. It provides an opportunity, a unique opportunity for parents and families to give their input and to hold states and districts accountable for their children's educational experience. So who are we holding accountable during COVID-19? The state of Florida and our districts. And that is why SCCPTA is coming and trying to make sure that we help train and educate our local units to be able to fight that fight within the forum that we have to be the voice for our students. Right now, we don't know when we're going to be able to have that face-to-face interaction with our legislators. But you know what we always have? We have email and we have internet. So thank God for that. And we're going to have to maximize it. That means we're going to have to maximize emailing our state legislators, representatives, our Congress people, and we're going to have to let them know this is what we need in our district for our schools, and here's some real life examples. Don't be afraid to put a face and a name to what we're advocating for. I had the opportunity to be on a call with Stephanie Murphy, and she loves having those real life experiences. So in our local units, I will be working with our local units every single week or every single day if that's what's necessary to make sure that we're getting the voices of our students heard. And a lot of times they're not as loud as we need them to be during COVID-19. We Zoom calls to legislate, that's exactly right. Zoom calls into legislators as well. And so Stephanie had the call in and we were able to share information with her. And she kept saying, I have two small children. I know how it is. My heart goes out to each and every teacher and each and every parent. If you can connect, if we as a PTA can connect with our legislators and we can help them remember that every single time they look at their child, they're looking at every single child within our county, within our district, within our state, then that is one step closer to us getting change for our students. There are 6 critical ways that we can engage parents and families, and this is very important. As PTAs, sometimes we get so wrapped up in the monotony or methodical process of what we're doing, making sure, we have PowerPoints together. Sometimes I get bogged down and I forget that there will be real people on the other end of these PowerPoints and these emails. And it's like, okay, wait a second. I have to be able to connect with these people in some type of way because they are not so remote that I can identify with them. They are just like me. I am a mom. I am a wife. I have a job. I'm trying to start another business. I must have a hole in my head. I have no idea. I'm involved in my church. My mother lives in Daytona. She's a widow. She's 72 years old. I have 2 boys, 9 and 14. So I see some people nodding their heads because we all can relate. And once you find that connection with a parent as a PTA member, we continue to ride that horse into the sunset. Whatever it takes to get that parent to be connected and stay connected. So how do we get them engaged? Representation. They have to first know that we represent their child in their voice. They have to know, number 2, that we're transparent. There is nothing hidden about what PTA is doing. One of the best things, and I think you're going to see at the end of these slides, that I heard our president say was we want to leave our footprint, our thumbprint, our imprint on Seminole County, on the state of Florida. Because then what good are we? I like to say when I'm 80 or 90 years old to the boys and I'm no longer here, I want them to know, man, My mom didn't just sit around and watch television and shop all the time. She was always volunteering to make sure my tomorrow was better. In order to do that, we have to look at equity. And for me, equity screams not just equality, but I also look at it from a legal perspective. Equity is a financial term. And when we look at that, I'm going to split that up into 3A and 3B. We have to make sure all of our parents feel like they are equal to the next parent. Just because I have a nephew who's autistic, it doesn't mean my brother is any less of a parent because he can't always show up to events at school. Let him know, you know what, you can't be there. Let me call you so you can listen in on the call. As PTA members, I believe it is our job to go that extra step, even if it's just for one parent. That one parent is worth the sacrifice. The second prong of equity being a fiscal term, look at our grant opportunities. Florida PTA and National PTA has so many grant opportunities that our local units can apply for. And right now, Seminole County has the COVID relief grant. I got an email this morning, anyone who's a military family like we are, USAA is giving out grants for military families. So we have to also tap into those grants to help bring to fruition those 6 critical ways that we can engage our families and our parents. Even if the grant is $1,200, that is more than what we had yesterday. So number 4, information. That is one of the ways I feel like we are doing so much better this year because we're forced to. And I keep trying to say, what is the bright line with this COVID-19? It is forcing us to read. It's forcing us to be more informative. It's forcing us to share information like we've never shared before. At one point, when we were face to face, we just kind of glazed over things. Being a chair of an elementary school advisory council, I would always say, hey, let's put it on different color paper. People are inundated with white paper. You give them purple paper, they're going to go, oh, what's on that purple paper? So information has to continue to stream to these parents. We don't want to drown them in information, but we want to make sure we are being proactive instead of reactive as PTA members. We want to make sure we are answering their need before they even realize the need arises. So many times we'll sit in chats and we're like, this is a problem I'm having. You know what? I didn't think about it, but you're right. That'll help someone else too. That's what PTA is all about. Progressive thinking advocators is what I like to say PTA stands for. Progressive thinking advocators. So now when we look at accessibility, we have to make sure our parents and the families of our students have accessibility or they have access to us. We have to make sure that if they have a question and they email PTA or they send a message through our local unit's Facebook pages, it doesn't take us days to respond back to them. We have to make sure that we are getting them information within at least 12 hours. At least. All of our local units, they have media persons who are handling their Facebook, their Twitter, things of that nature. I try to make sure for the school that my boys are in that we post something every day, even if it's just, a motivational post. Let's all hang in there. We're in there together. So let them know that they're accessible, that we're accessible to them. And lastly, feedback. Don't be afraid. We can't be afraid of the feedback that our parents give. We want them to tell us, well, I felt like PTA dropped the ball on this particular issue. When I was at legislative conference the end of January, February, first part of February, I'll never forget the testimony, I will call it, by the mom whose son died on the football field because of heat exhaustion. He played football and they did not render care fast enough to her son. I was sitting in the chambers and tears were just welled in the back of my eyes And I kept thinking, don't blink, Victoria, because if you blink, that's going to be it. It's going to be a bucket of tears coming down. And she was very passionate about wanting to make sure every school has something as sensible and as simple as a kiddie pool, just to be able to put these athletes in to cool their bodies down. So if someone had to say to PTA, hey, I need you guys to not drop the ball in following through to make sure this is done with all of our high schools, welcome that feedback, because it helps PTA grow and build so that our families and our students can have a better tomorrow. Also, we want to make sure that we teach our parents as PTA how to advocate for their children themselves. And they can do that by joining PTA. They can do that by partnering with us, getting arm in arm, and say, you're not fighting this battle alone. You're fighting it with all of us. You have the full backing of all of us, because it's not just your child, it's everyone's child. Okay? Here are just a few ways to advocate. There are many different ways that you can, but these are just 4 of the ones that I indicated. And even that voter voice at the bottom on National PTA, it is extremely instrumental and powerful. If you go to that link, and I will actually take that link and put in the comments, or I will email it to everyone when the class is over, you can go and you can see who all of your political representatives are. You just type in your zip code. That's it. But you can get updates on federal policies. You can see what we're doing as we prepare for legislative conference next year, even if it's virtual. Hey, if we had the Florida PTA convention virtually, we can do LegCon virtually if it's required. But these are different ways that we're able to advocate. And we have to encourage our parents. You know what? I'm going to a school board meeting. How about we grab a coffee and you join me at the school board meeting? You know, whatever the enticement is. Think about whenever you take your kids to the dentist. Our boys go to Dr. White, and I love his office because in Lake Mary, he has all of these sea life creatures on the ceilings and on the walls. And I said, man, I asked him, I said, do you do adult teeth? He's like, no. If you're not at least this tall, we no. If you are taller than this, we don't help, adults. And the way they entice children to relax and be settled, they have games in there. I mean, the PlayStation and Xbox that the kids can get on while they're waiting to be seen or between treatments. And so they're able to sit at this little table and play with the games. And then he says, all right, come on, let me see what your teeth look like. And he's friendly and he's jovial. And then when they're done, they get incentives for being a good patient. They get stickers, they get bouncy balls, they get all sorts of things that we as moms step on in the middle of the night when we're trying to pick up stuff. We're like, God bless America, I just stepped on a freaking Lego. But they're happy when they go to the dentist. And as PTA members, we have to be able to do the exact same thing. Encourage parents to join us so that we can help them advocate for their student, for their children. I saw this and I thought it was pertinent. A major part of child advocacy is asking the tough questions as many times and in as many ways as it takes to have a clear understanding of the answer. Just because a legislator puts you off and says, well, it's political season, I have to get back with you. That's when you go, You do realize my neighborhood has over 300 families. It would be a shame to lose the election by 300 votes. You take whatever avenue you have to take. But as PTA, we try to work with our candidates, but when we're talking to parents, we have to meet them where they are. We have to remind these legislators, you're a parent too, or you have a parent. Don't you want someone to advocate for your parent or for your child? Well, PTA, we advocate for children. And I recognize it's political season, or I recognize it's the holidays. It doesn't matter how many times you have to connect with that politician to get their attention. One time may not be enough. But do not be afraid to keep asking the same question over and over and over again. and make sure that the answer we receive is the answer that we need. Because I can give you a very wordy and colorful answer, and then when you hang up the phone or you log off, you're like, I don't even think that they answered the question, but it sounded good. So we want to make sure that they're not just blowing us off with something that doesn't matter or doesn't help us. Because at the end of the day, what Seminole County PTA wants to do, what we want to do in our local units, is make sure that we're asking them the tough questions over and over and over again, and making sure they give us a clear and complete answer. I'll just let you ponder on that one for a while. If we don't stand up for children, we being PTA, then we don't stand for much. And that's a heavy responsibility to take on. But I keep thinking, my dad passed a few years ago, and my dad made sure that he bared the burden for the entire family. We could go to my dad for anything and everything. And if we ever said, this happened at school with my teacher, it didn't matter if my dad was in the middle of a job. He's a third generation brick mason, so he had construction crews all over town. It didn't matter. My dad would say, you know what? I have to go to the school about this, that, and the other. He always made sure we knew that we were his priority. I will never forget sharing another personal matter with you. When my sister and I were younger, and my dad used to work for a Kindle company. If you've ever had surgery, been to a hospital, you see the products, the gauzes and things like that, they're made by Kindle. My dad worked for the company. He was actually responsible for the sterilization of all of those items before they were packaged. And one of his supervisors said to him, you can't be off for this particular day, whatever day it was. My dad kindly reached in his wallet. You see this? You see these two pictures? These are who I work for. You may sign my paycheck, but I work for these two kids. And I never forgot that, even as an adult, about to turn 48. I've never forgotten that my dad stood up for me and my sister, even with his job. And that's how we as PTA members have to be. Just because I may be second vice president, just because you may be president of your local unit, just because you may be treasurer, it does not make us rise above standing up for any child. It doesn't have to be a room full of children. It could be one child. One child who feels like no one speaks up for me when it's time to get on the bus. Because I move slower than other kids because I have a disability, or because I have sensory issues and loud noises bother me. When I'm going to get on the bus driver doesn't wait for me to just find a seat. I have to gather myself because it's so loud on the bus. And they start to pull off, and I've fallen down a couple of times, and then the other kids are laughing at me. And they're poking fun at me. Each and every one of us, we have to be that voice that's willing to stand up for that one child. We have to be able to be willing to go to the school board and say, we have an issue with the transportation department. That's who we are as SCCPTA. That's why I enjoy being joined and connected with a group of advocates to fight for children. That's why I can do this with my heart and soul. That's why it doesn't matter how late I have to stay up. If it means protecting one child that could be my child, I'm going to do just that. Moving on to our last slide.